We've had a couple of requests to ask exactly what you mean by Anglosphere, especially when it comes in relation to China, for example.
Understood. Okay, so the Anglosphere is basically, it's not merely the English-speaking countries such as UK, US, Canada, and those of the Commonwealth. It also involves those countries' legal systems which are all based on common law. And common law will facilitate the rebuilding of the Anglo economies, because you can go bankrupt much easier and you can set up companies much easier with less red tape. And that's actually been one of Donald Trump's biggest achievements since he became president, has been getting rid of enormous amounts of red tape regulation. Right. And the last thing we need in the rebuilding of the global economy right now is red tape stopping the creation of new companies. Mm-hmm. And so you have that jurisdictional flexibility, and you actually also see that in the financial markets, because the two big centres, of course, are London and New York. And I was noting this morning before I came on air some interesting statistics that shows London really, the European Union cannot do without London as a financial market. There is no replacement. It has 43% of all foreign exchange turnover. And the interesting aspect of that is, if you recall when the Fed came in and offered the swap lines to the central banks around the world due to the dollar shortage, dollars were bid up. You had basically the US bank and the UK commercial bank not releasing dollars into the system as they wanted to keep hold of them. Mm-hmm. So the central banks of the ECB included, central banks around the world requested the dollar swap lines, and the US facilitated. Now, London played a pivotal role in that, in distributing the dollars. And that shows you the power of both London and the US in terms of the financial markets. And I have to say, my thought process is that the global economies, given all the government funding that's going on and the corporate bond issuance going on, the global economies require well-oiled, easy condition financial markets in order to rebuild.
Yes.
And that's where London and New York will be critical. And I would hasten to add, I suspect some of the other centres. We've probably lost Hong Kong for all intents and purposes, but Singapore moves into that, as does possibly even Sydney. Mm-hmm. But you're going to see the majority of activity from the government and corporate side centred on the US and the UK market for distribution purposes and raising funding.
Interesting analysis. I'd like to speak a bit about Apple shifting out of China to India, even with the production of iPhones. Can we talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's partly Apple directing. I also think Foxconn, funnily enough, have facilitated. And what I'm understanding is there's a decent chunk of production will be shifted to India, again within the Anglosphere because of India's history. And I've also heard that some of the production goes back to the US as well. And that sort of makes sense, because if you look at the way China is reacting right now, you've got what they describe as the wolf warrior diplomats, and there's no subtlety in the messaging going on as I've seen it. And I think the best example there would be how they've approached Australia. Mm-hmm. So they've introduced 80% tariffs on barley imports into China, and they've now cut supply of beef from four of the four largest Australian abattoirs. Mm-hmm. Mm. And there's an aggressive war of words going on there. And this is because Australia has asked for an independent commission to look into the source of the virus and the cause of the spread. And I think that messaging, you've seen it, the tension begin to build with the US. UK's got an interesting situation building up there, but you've got combined Hong Kong as well as Huawei causing pressure on the UK-China relations.
Yes.
You've got Canada also a stress relation vis-a-vis China because they're holding in custody Huawei's founder's daughter, who's CFO of Huawei.
Yes, yes.
And there are secrets
Can I
of
ask,
their surely there as well.
You mentioned Huawei. Is this going to affect the rollout of 5G?
I'm pretty simple on this. I think it will make it more expensive. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is it's logical, given the background of Huawei, where some of the more extreme opinions of Huawei is that it is a corporate subsidiary of the PLL, People's Liberation Army. But you wouldn't, in the old days, there was a simple allegory to be made. In the old days, you wouldn't have had your phone system or your technology supplied by the Soviet Union, and I think it's a comparable allegory. And I do think it will impact Huawei, but you have Nokia and Ericsson, and you also have Cisco moving in. And I suspect what you will see is more of that business going there in that direction because it's the right thing to do in the current environment.
Yes.
If you've got you can see even the French have had a diplomatic spat with the Chinese. Mm-hmm.
I understand.
So, if I look upon China going around and saying, well, we don't like to interfere in people's internal politics, that's exactly what they've been doing.
Exactly.
And they've been leveraging their trade relationships. You wonder what's behind all that. And I think you've got a clear bloc building on the Anglo-Spheric side, the countries I mentioned beforehand, which would include India, who've had a little bit of a hot confrontation on the Himalayas over the water situation
Nick,
with the Chinese.
I'm being told,
Sure.
Nick, that we have to wind up. So
Okay.
thank you very much for your input today and your advice, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much. That was Nick Glinsman, who is a global markets specialist. He'll be back with us next week with some more tips. We're going to speak about the falling gold price, but no time. See you tomorrow, same time again at 5:40. I wish you a good evening. I'm Leah Hogg from Net News.